If you're sick of the mainstream sports outlets, well, so was I. So I started my own show. I'm Shane Larson, and this is the Game Time Guru. It's different than other talk shows. I'm providing a panoramic view on sports so you can see them through a different lens. So buckle up and let's go. What's up, everybody? Welcome out to another episode of the Game Time Guru podcast. This is episode 103, and today we're diving into the world of sports by interviewing a former Boise State football player who's getting ready for the NFL draft. He's got an amazing story. He's going to tell us about his journey through the football world and what he expects of himself in the next couple of years. Remember his name. His name's Durrant Miles, and we're going to get to that interview in just a second. Before we do so, a couple housekeeping items. I want to make sure you guys remember, hit that subscribe button, whether you're on an iPhone, iPad, if you're on an Android. Make sure you find the podcast on whichever platform you want. It's on the Apple Podcast app on your iOS device. And Google Play Music is on an Android, but you can find it on YouTube, Spotify, and pretty much every single podcast platform, Stitcher, Podcast Addict, CastBox, TuneIn, any of those, it's there. We're there to share our stories, share the journeys of the other individuals on the show with all of you. So I appreciate you guys joining us. Make sure to hit that subscribe button so that you can listen to any of the previous episodes and catch the future ones coming forward. So I want to get you guys ready for this interview. It's awesome. I am a Boise State fan because I graduated from Boise State. You guys know that by now. If you don't, you're new to the show, just now you know. Graduated from Boise State, have followed Boise State football since I was a little kid. And today I had the opportunity to interview Durrant Miles. You're going to love what he's got to say. He's got an interesting journey. We're excited for him to share his story because we know what he's going to do. He's going to make a name for himself in the NFL. Enjoy the interview. What's going on, everybody? Welcome out to another episode of the Game Time Guru podcast. As you guys know by now, I'm Shane Larson, your host, and today I'm joined by Durrant Miles, the former Boise State football defensive end. He's currently training, getting ready to get up to the big league, the NFL. So, Durrant, thanks so much for taking the time to join us here on the podcast.
Absolutely, Shane. Thank you for having me.
For sure, my man. Now, you're currently training. I kind of wanted to get a little update of what you're up to now, Durrant, especially for the people here in the valley of Boise, Meridian, all this Treasure Valley area who know you. You know, they followed Boise State football. What are you up to now, and kind of what's your day-to-day look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I just got back into town about a week ago with my wife. I was down in Scottsdale, Arizona, training at a facility called Exos with some of the, top guys like Zach Allen, Brian Burns, some of those guys. So it was good to see, the competition really, like the other guys that I guess play my same position that are going to be, going with me into this draft class. But now I'm back into town. I've just been grinding here at the facility at Boise State, and also got a shout out to off the field as well. Taylor, my man, he's been getting me right too.
Heck yeah, man. You talking about Taylor Bateman over at Off the Field?
Yep.
Yeah, man. Taylor's a good dude. That I got to get him on the show too sometime, man. Talk about the athletes he's been training. So that's super cool. You've been working with him too. They do a lot of good work here with the athletes around the valley. So you're getting ready for the draft, man. Heck yeah. And you said you're getting ready for the draft. And before we get into that discussion, I kind of want to go back to something you just said. Actually, you mentioned you came down with your wife, and that was something that came up in the news a couple times. Like you kind of had that non-traditional collegiate experience. You were married and such, and I kind of want to just touch base on that, like how it was for you when you were going through college here at Boise State, and you were married. Like, was it different for you? Was it a cool experience having your spouse side by side with you going through a Division I football competition? Like, what was it like when you had all your teammates, the majority of which were not married? Was it a different experience for you, or was it normal?
Yeah, it was. Obviously, it's not your typical college experience when you think of a Division I big time school like football player. You don't really expect them to be married, so it was different in that aspect. But for me, it worked out perfectly. My wife, Cara, she does such an amazing job. Like, she's so dedicated to me and to this process that we're going through, and she's always been my rock. She is so awesome. Like, whenever I get home, she's always, encouraging, and she helps me stay disciplined through the whole process. So I couldn't do it without her, that's for sure.
That's awesome, man. It's actually really cool because myself, I got married at a younger age in my early 20s, and I just always, kind of related to you from afar. You know what I mean? I just kind of looked at it going through college, and I was like, That's super cool. Like, you see it at other schools, a lot of them, some other schools, it's, typical to have, guys that are, married at the college level, but not too much here in Boise. And it's just cool to watch it. And, still we're able to dominate on the football field and, juggle the married life at home, because it's not always easy, but it sounds like you had a good rock with your wife. So that's awesome, man. Yeah, man. And so one of the things I wanted to ask you, Durrant, was one of the biggest things you learned at Boise State, and I wanted to break this into two questions. What's the biggest thing you learned in the classroom, and what's the biggest thing you learned on the football field during your tenure at Boise State University?
For the first part of that question, I would say the biggest thing I learned in the classroom, well, I'm a health science major, so, med school is something that I was always looking forward to. Obviously, I'm going to pursue this dream and this draft. But so in school, I think one thing that I learned was definitely, daily discipline and being able to, really kind of just do the work. And that's another thing. I mean, that leads me right into what I learned at Boise State on the field is you have to be dedicated and you have to put in the work. And that's one thing that we always, try and sell ourselves as is we're a blue collar, mentality kind of university football team. And so I think that's something that I learned on the field as well as in the classroom is just having that, it's time to go to work. You got to put in the work to see the results. So that's what I'd say.
I love it, man. Awesome. Now, when you were at Boise State, did you have a favorite memory from the football side of things, whether it be the best game you ever played in, like against a certain opponent, or like one of the best games that you had specifically as a player? What was your best memory as a football player at Boise State?
I would say, well, I'll give you two different experiences. One, because it was so memorable for me when I was a true freshman, playing behind Kamale Correa, at the outside linebacker position. I didn't get a ton of opportunities to play, but I remember we traveled out to Virginia, and this must have been the fourth game into the season. And anyways, I remember it was third quarter. We were up by a lot, and my very first collegiate play, I was in there. I was so nervous. And anyways, I'm off the ball a little bit, and sure enough, they say set hut, and they're in a different formation that I had never really seen on film. And back then, I wasn't the same as I am now. Grinding in the film room is something that I pride myself on now. But as a freshman, you're still trying to pick up things and trying to learn. Anyways, long story short, the ball was coming right at me, and I had a lead block like a fullback trying to come and kick me out, and it was just like a power ISO play towards me. And anyways, I took on that first block and kind of just hit him just right, so he kind of crumpled down to his knees, and then the running back kind of just was right there for me, so I just grabbed him and took him down, and my very first play of college was about a 3 or 4 yard tackle for loss. So that was something that I'll never forget. Just for me as a player individually, but I think as a team, one of my favorite moments was obviously when we won the Las Vegas Bowl last year with Leighton and Cedric. That was an incredible moment, and just having such a big leadership role on that team, it was something that really was fulfilling to me as a player, and I know it was for our program as well.
Heck yeah, man. Speaking about both of those games, I remember exactly where I was during the Virginia game. I was watching that at a friend's house. I know exactly what was going on. So I'm trying to put it in my head. I don't remember that specific play, but that's awesome that was your first collegiate play. It almost sounds like a Rudy experience. Granted, you actually got to dominate through the rest of your collegiate career. Yeah, right? But it's really cool hearing that. And then that Oregon game, and you just mentioning those names like Leighton and Ced and all the rest of the guys that were on that squad, that was that was a cool squad you guys had, and it's cool to see some of the guys you got to play with, and and you had that leadership role with the rest of them. And you remind me, your style actually reminds me of Leighton's a lot. It's that blue collar mentality. You put in the work and you're efficient. That's one thing that comes to mind when I think of Durrant Miles. I'm always like, efficiency. Like, you get out there and you put in work, and it's always efficient. It's almost like a LeBron James type stat line where it's efficient. He shoots well from the floor, over 40% all the time. It's an efficient stat line. You're always in there. So it's cool to watch you work. Now, do you have a specific teammate though, Durrant, that kind of, had a bigger impact? You mentioned Correa, you mentioned Leighton, you mentioned Seth, but you had a lot of good teammates around you your entire career. Was there any one specific one that had the largest impact on you during your time at Boise State?
On me, individually, I would probably say, that's a good question, because I would say between Ben Weaver, who was our starting middle linebacker over Leighton his senior year, he just kind of, and I was a sophomore at the time, he really took me under his wing and showed me the ropes, as far as what it means to put in the extra work off the field, in the film room, in the weight room. And he kind of instilled in me, along with Sam McCaskill. That's the other person I was going to say, is Sam McCaskill. Those two together, man, I'll tell you, that duo of leadership is probably the best that I had seen at Boise through my tenure there. So.
That's awesome, man. That's actually really cool. It's cool to hear it from your perspective. So now, one thing I always ask athletes, we know this and me as a former athlete, and just everybody that's, competed in any kind of setting, you learn a lot from the losses that you go through, right? That's usually your biggest learning point. You can learn from anything with the wins and losses, but I'm curious because during your tenure, there were some tough losses, ones that we thought maybe you guys should have been able to win. But was there any loss in particular that hit you the hardest and that you learned the most from during your tenure?
I would say the one that hurt the most was just this past year when we lost to Fresno in the Mountain West Conference Championship on the blue. That one hurt bad. Not only because it was freezing cold out there, so that made it even more miserable, but just the fact that that's not how I wanted to end my senior season. So that one hurt a lot. One that I grew from a lot, I would say, was our Washington. Let's see. Excuse me. Our Oklahoma State game this past year as well. I think we learned a lot as a team from that, and kind of bounced back throughout the season, and ended up playing real well through our division, and I think we did a good job bouncing back from that game.
Heck yeah, that would have been a tough one, man. As a player, it's tough as a fan, obviously, but as a player, everyone understands it's hard on the players, and I felt you guys were just as good, if not better, of a team than them. But things didn't roll your way a couple times, and it's cool that it's cool that you go through the tough stuff. It sucks at times, but I think it prepares you for the next level, and that's kind of where you're going towards now. You're going towards that next level. I mean, you had a tough loss in the Mountain West Championship. You had a tough loss with Oklahoma State, but you kept going. You're still training. Now, I want you to tell us, Durrant, where can we expect to see you in the next 6 months? Where do we want to see Durrant Miles? Where do you want to be, and what impact do you want to have on the game of football?
Oh, heck, whatever team decides to pick me up, I'll be more than ecstatic to be there. And I think as me as a football player, I see myself my rookie season just trying to have the biggest impact that I can, and being a versatile player. Maybe that's something that other players in my position can't do as much. But I think that for me, being able to contribute on special teams, being able to contribute at multiple positions on defense, I think that gives me an upper hand as well. So, I just want to be able to make the biggest impact for whatever team picks me up, and just, work my butt off. That's one thing you can always expect.
Heck yeah, man. You're a hard worker, Durrant, and I appreciate you joining me on the show. Now, this is not Durrant talking right now. This is Shane Larson talking. I wouldn't mind if you were on the Cowboys. That's my squad. I'd like to have some more Boise State guys squad up with us. So that's me talking, not you, so for the record. But Durrant, I really appreciate you joining us and giving us a little bit of insight of your journey at Boise State and where we expect to see you. And, I mean, for me and the listeners, we can't wait to see you at the next level, and we're excited to see where you go, my man. Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much for having me on. It means the world. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, no doubt. And for the rest of you guys out there, you know the drill. We'll talk to you next week. Guys, thanks so much for listening to another episode of my show. Now, if you could go and do me a favor, head over to iTunes, give me 5 stars, and leave me a review. It would be greatly appreciated. Thanks, guys. Appreciate your support.